That's another thing, people who, go on about SEO, they don't understand that it's not, the end goal isn't to be number one on Google or even number one on chat. It's to create engagement that leads to sales. That's the ultimate goal.
Love to hear like how you got into this, how you got into first off like freelancing, like marketing, but then also how you got into specifically like B2B SaaS, cybersecurity.
Yeah, thanks for your questions. I have roughly about 9, 10 plus years of experience just, in copywriting and content management, more or less. I really started writing at a young age. I'm actually a novelist myself. I'm trying to get a few things published. So, storytelling has always been a part of, who I am and what I do. And I started off, I wasn't an in-demand copywriter when I was right out of college. So I started freelancing for, a digital education service called study.com. And from there, I built up my resume. And now I've done everything from, I have clients that are in, waste disposal, physical fitness, cybersecurity, MSPs. I've done a lot of content for a range of clients, but always I go back to SaaS. It's exciting to work in technology and in SaaS, and it can be a little scary, seeing things develop, and you learn more about cyber threats and, the rates that people are going through, a single data breach, the damage that can cause. It's shocking, but it's also a privilege to be able to educate people on what threats are going on, but also how tech can, solve a lot of these problems and create, meaningful changes in an organization to keep them and their customers, by extension, protected. So yeah, I've done everything in fintech, cybersecurity, SaaS, a little bit of event management platform, SaaS with Cvent. So yeah, I keep coming back to SaaS. Long story short.
I love it, man. That's awesome. So, what's your favorite element of like working with these B2B SaaS companies? I know.
Yeah.
So you mentioned like with the cybersecurity element, like you're kind of. It sounds like you're interested in like the problems that they solve and how you can help support their goals. So I just love to hear your take on what drove you
Yeah.
to help with
Yeah.
B2B SaaS.
Yeah. Thanks, Keaton. So yeah, B2B. I've done B2C and B2B. I find B2B just a little bit more engaging. You're dealing with, first of all, pretty much every business, every decision maker, they have no time, right? So they need to make a decision that's data backed, that's, quick. So the challenge is always, to deliver the story and really answer the why our product, why our solution, why our methodology. It's getting it, blood on the first page right away, but also kind of leading them through the journey that in a way that we show that through the writing and through the content that we understand their needs and we have a solution to help them overcome their pain points, but also, in a way that will help them grow and be a better organization, function at a higher efficiency. So, I just enjoy being able to help businesses overcome problems by finding the right technology, and then they can grow and prosper. And then by extension, again, their customers will be better and they'll be able to give better service and, achieve better deadlines and better products, and that's a great way that technology can be useful.
That's awesome, man. So that's interesting. So you mentioned technology and like if I understand you correctly, like helping your customers find better technology to like help better their business. Could you dive a little bit deeper into that?
Sure. So let's take a look at it from a cybersecurity point of view. The market is saturated. It's saturated. There's so many different solutions out there. There are individual MSPs that will help you, like everyone from small business to enterprise, kind of manage things. It's finding which solution works best for you. Which is the best for your kind of organization. And maybe you're not up to scale yet, but maybe everyone needs some form of cybersecurity, but which is the one that's going to help you conform to your specific needs? So maybe you're in a heavily compliance focused industry, you have a heavily regulated industry. You're going to want a solution that'll be able to help you manage GRC a little bit better and help you be able to document your processes and be able to, aggregate, your reporting in a way that's going to show that you're actually meeting these steps and taking privacy measures on specific data and that it's safeguarded well. So really kind of, focusing on the pain points themselves and being able to take the solution and look at what's going on, in a macro, what's going on in the overall world of, cyber and threats that are coming out. AI has been a big issue. We're getting more in depth and really really detailed. I just did a piece on deepfakes, for example. So being able to not only educate people on what these things are going on, but also look at how the technology can help you overcome some of those things. And some solution might not work for every single person. That's why you have to really have a dedicated focus on your specific customers. Maybe your solution isn't the best for this industry. It's kind of figuring out what works best for these different groups. And specifically to the individual decision maker, I wouldn't write a piece. I mean, I've certainly written general pieces, but sometimes it's necessary to write content and develop content that's focused towards a more tech focused person like a CTO, or maybe you're just focusing on the kind of like the middle management. So just kind of changing the language slightly. It's all about kind of speaking to their needs on a macro and micro level.
Love that, man. It's interesting. You mentioned GRC a little bit. I currently work for Paramify, and we're like a GRC software.
Yep, that's got to throw it in there because I'm like, oh, I know what these guys do. Yeah,
Oh
I know
yeah,
what you're coming from.
I love it. Yeah. So like for me, when I was getting into like the GRC space and like figuring out how to like market a GRC software, it was pretty difficult for me because there's so many like acronyms and all these little really niche things that you have to learn. I'm curious for you, like what was your journey like learning, say something super niche like GRC so then you can effectively market it for your freelance clients?
Great question. So, well, when I was at full time with Accounting C, which is an accounting platform built off Salesforce, I was a content manager and the lead copywriter. And one of the first things I do, and you're not just isolated in content and marketing, as you're only as strong as your thought leaders, and people who understand the product. So one of the projects I did was developing a guide talking about our security aspects, because one of the biggest pain points that all of our customers had, didn't matter which industry, whether they're a CTO or the CEO or the head accountant, it was always around security. And it was, is our financial data secured? And it led to me having to go down a big rabbit hole to learn about not only what the threat landscape is and was at that time, and kind of what the estimates were going to be, what the real time costs were, but also looking kind of a little in the future, and also seeing how our product was adaptable and able to meet these things. And it's not just, you can't just say, well, we're built off Salesforce and it's safe. You really, that doesn't really comfort a lot of customers, especially if they're like high level financial experts, or they're dealing with really private information of their customers. So I had to really go down and discuss things like how you could really create these internal controls, and there was session monitoring, and just making sure that all of these aspects of the life cycle of handling their data and their finances, not only that it was accurate, but that it was well protected, and that we had multiple layers of protection in our platform. So that really started me off on the cybersecurity bug, pun intended. And just from there, I kept working with SaaS, and I ended up going into commercial real estate marketing for a while, and then I left that. It was layoffs, so now I'm freelancing. But I've always come back to cybersecurity after that. It just kind of really interested me, and since then I've developed content for several MSPs. One of them was in Canada, some of them in Austin, all over, through a partnership with morebusiness.com. Very great organization. And I've also just been, kind of taken upon myself to take cybersecurity courses. I'm presently wrapping up the Google Cybersecurity professional certificate program. So I plan to get a few more. And whether I want to transition to cybersecurity directly or just keep marketing, it's just about keep learning. It makes you more valuable as a content manager, copywriter, as a marketer in general. I mean, anything that you can do to add value and bring that authenticity to your work will impact you for years and years going.
I love it. I love it. So that's really interesting. So like you've taken upon yourself to like say for these niche companies that you've been working with, you've taken upon yourself to be like, all right, I want to like get some certifications. I want to like actually really learn this stuff. It's not going to just be like, hey, I want to like take a transcript from like an expert talking and throw it into chat and ask for like key bullet points. You're actually going out and
Great.
learning this stuff.
I got a great story for that, actually. But yeah, so, whenever you take on a new piece of content or a new organization, there's always in-depth research. You always have to learn because right now, authority sells and authenticity sells, especially when you have it chat, things like Chat GPT and these AI. People crave and need authentic voices. And it's not a cure-all and it's not always correct. So you need to be able to research and provide legitimate data and insights. But it's funny, I actually won business with morebusiness.com, but through Raj Kara, great guy, very savvy SEO specialist. Because his one writer, he would do these interviews with these MSPs, very qualified thought leaders in the cybersecurity space. I've done pieces, like I said, on kind of the threats of AI to data security, but they would just take the interview transcript and dump it in ChatGPT, and it would produce this ungodly that long form, and it just wasn't usable. It just read awkwardly. It had no finesse. There was no additional information. And the way I differentiated myself is and I'll use AI as well, but it's kind of as a starting block. What I did was I took the interviews and I went in and did additional research, pulled in relevant data to back up these claims, layered in the brand language of these different organizations, carrying over their personal, voice as well, and incorporated all of this together in a way that, it met SEO. I think several of them were top five of SEO and Google, and several of them were LLMO optimized. I'm really focusing on LLMO optimization now to be able to be found, but also to be understood by a human being in a way that's not
Yeah,
just upchuck on a page. So yeah, there's definitely a right way and a wrong way. And he actually, I think a while back, he actually wrote a post on how you can't just dump everything that you get from an AI program into like publish it. It's not gonna be very good. It's a bad idea.
absolutely. Yeah, something that we tend to practice a lot, like at Paramify, like let's say with like written content. This is ran by Becky. She's like incredible, great content writer. But one of the things that we try to like hound in is like we want to create content that is just generally useful for people and fun to read. Like
Yes.
that's it, right? It's optimizing for people, and then therefore that's going to help with search engine optimization, and it's going to help with optimizing for AI.
Hmm.
But it's interesting, at least from what we've seen, it's like, yeah, if you can just optimize for people, you're going to be optimizing for almost everything else.
Yeah, I saw some. There's always people are always talking heads. Some people say, "Oh, SEO is dead," or "Google is dead." It's not. You have to just focus on this. I mean, saying that saying that you're throwing out the standard SEO playbook is kind of like saying, well, we have rubber tires now, so we don't need the wheel. Good SEO writing was never focused on stuffing keywords. It was focusing on topics that people were looking for. And now you look at these learning language models, they're focused on specific questions. And even before, I was always, using headers that presented a question and then answered it in depth shortly. And that's the kind of thing that gets you ranked not only in Google, but in these, AI summaries. It's funny. I always think of, I don't know if you say it, Blade Runner, more human
Oh
than
yeah,
human. It's really just focusing on, sounding more like, it's conversational is a big keyword here. So having intelligent thought leadership, but that's also relatable and that clearly explains things. If you do that, you're going to rank, and no matter what you use.
love it. I love it. So I know like you're very focused on copywriting, and I'm just curious for let's say your B2B clients, what is just your favorite overall B2B marketing strategy?
Geez. Well, I always say in content management, it's not what do we write about this or that or this or that. It's really there's so much that you need to touch on. Especially if you're in if you're in SaaS, if a product that does multiple things, you have a lot of topics. But I think that the overarching, you know, focus that everyone needs to concentrate on is just answering why. Why? Can you answer sufficiently how, why your solution is better or is more positioned to help the client than another one? Why you? Why your process? So when I was working at FNRP, which was the commercial real estate company, we had what we called three uniques. It was kind of like our bread and butter. It was what made us us. That was our why. We had a dragnet. We were extremely focused on finding quality properties that we thought that through investigation would really do well. We kept everything in house, so we didn't outsource anything, so we could control everything. and we built, relationships with the tenants, so all of these things work together to create a process that, delivered strong, grocery anchored commercial real estate properties to invest in. And that was our why, because anybody can have success once. Any product can have a great turnaround once. It's the process and consistency that really cements your why. So being able to take a solution and give deep insights and backed up by data and results to demonstrate why it works and how it's been adjusted to different organizations and how it worked there. That's really what's going to sell. So really answering why and then backing that up with data is going to be the biggest, most important overarching strategy you can use for any kind of marketing campaign.
Yeah, I love that. That's awesome. So I'm curious. You're heavily focused content writing and creating just authentic, very useful pieces. I'm curious how AI. You mentioned you've been using it, but I wonder how is AI changing your approach to your content marketing strategy, and how are you balancing, say, the efficiency gains with AI with also like originality and just like making sure your pieces are useful
Yep.
and human. Yeah.
Great question. And it's a big one, and it's one that I'm still figuring out. I think it's something that we're all still figuring out, because I think the truth is
100%.
we're still learning about AI and we're still learning about the ramifications. There's still a lot of fear out there. But I was listening to one person who was talking about kind of addressing the concerns about AI, and it's like, do they want it to do everything for you, or what if it was like, kind of the AI on the Starship Enterprise, right? That it kind of helped solve the problem, and you could talk to it and it could give you some information, and I don't know, they would figure things out like that. That's how I think it should progress, and that's kind of how I use it. So I incorporate it into my every single workflow I do. And what I'll usually use it for is kind of doing some quick research and getting some chunks of content on the page, just that I can then validate and find details and data to supplement it with. And from there, I'll actually incorporate the brand language. So it might give me a summary that I then take and wordsmith into something that's even better. But it doesn't stop from there. What I'll actually do, what I've gotten to the process of doing, is feeding the content that I've done mostly myself, feeding it into it, and just getting an analysis of how the SEO is tracking and how the LMO is tracking, and what's the readability. And it'll actually give me the way I've programmed it. It'll actually give me kind of like 0 to 10 how I'm doing. And so I can use that as kind of like a guiding light to kind of make adjustments, quick adjustments from here and there, and then I'll have it create a couple of question Q&As for me, and it's a lot of the battle's done. It still takes time, even with automation, even with AI, quality content will still take time. It's not like it's gonna like take it and do it in 30 seconds. I think that if you do something and you pop it in and put it out in 30 seconds, I think you should be a little concerned. But what it does is it
Yeah.
really revolutionizes the strategy behind it, because now I can go in and create, feed a couple of ideas and then get a roadmap of like, hey, this is what, the next 3 months of content should look like. We'll have posting here and here and here and here, and we'll focus on these subjects, and we'll create kind of like these microcosms that'll all, link back to this one page. In that sense, it's so useful on a macro level, and on a micro kind of like I'm working it day to day, working with a blog or something or a landing page. I can kind of bounce ideas back and forth, but I still do the writing. It's not like I just hand it off. I use it as kind of like an assistant to kind of check where I am, get a summary that I then wordsmith and change, and most importantly, bring in the individuality of the client, their language, their why into it, and then go from there. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I love it. So what's your favorite AI tool to use within that process?
Yeah, so I've used a couple would be too much. I've done a little bit with the Outlook. I keep forgetting what that one's called. I think well, I'll be honest. The one that I keep going back to is ChatGPT. And, maybe I'm basic, but it's just something that I just started using and I've experimented more with. But, it's kind of like with an SEO tool, right? They all do the same kind of thing, but it's just they might have a few different features. You're going to prefer one program to another. I prefer ChatGPT, just like I would prefer Ahrefs, for example. But could I use
Yeah.
another one? Sure. It's That's another good thing about it. They're very user friendly. But yeah, I use ChatGPT, and I've also been experimenting with Sora to create kind of imagery as well. Just kind of on the side, just kind of, for my own storytelling thing, and my creative side. But, for postings, just the other day, I did something on GRC, and I was actually talking about, you can identify with this, GRC, it's not just straight up about security. It's really about, you know, compliance and making sure that your business is heading in the right direction. And I made an analogy to compare it to kind of like Dune. We're throwing out all these sci-fi references today, but
I love it.
kind of like the plans within plans. And from there, I prompted ChatGPT to create a graphic that kind of used GRC and kind of invoked this Dune symbolism, the plans within plans. And I got a really banger, image that I just, uploaded with my post. I'm like, oh, perfect. Great example of how to use it. I have an original idea. I feed it in. I can tell it what I want. And I have something that I can then take and mold and use. And I also use it to help me, reshape my posts a little bit too. So great tool. But a tool isn't a replacement. It's a tool. And you're only as good as you are using it.
Absolutely. I completely agree. Especially currently, AI is legit only as good as the user. Like,
Yeah.
if you don't understand what you're talking about, it's like it's going to produce garbage. Like, say if we're talking about ChatGPT and even say Sora, it's very interesting. Like, say, I remember the first time I was experimenting with, let's say Sora or VO3, and the quality of what was coming
Yeah.
out was horrendous. It was like so
100%.
bad.
100%.
Yeah, but it's like once you learn the tool, it's like you can create
Yeah.
almost photorealistic images, and it's so cool. But
Oh
yeah,
yeah. I mean, I've experimented a little with Copilot. That was the word. That was the name I was looking for. And I don't know. I just find, we're all gonna have our different ones. ChatGPT just works for me. But I encourage people to experiment. And you might use it one way, and you might use it for another way. And sometimes I don't use it. Sometimes if it's a really quick thing, I just won't, because it'll take more time for me to formulate how I want the prompt and how I want it to come out than it would be. I'm just gonna write it. So it's a give and take. But I found it mostly useful for creating, finding quick research and, creating, like I said, those summaries that I can then take, paste, and then just really, bring out my own creativity and rewrite, and just it gives me a starting point. Not sure if you're a content marketer or what kind of area you are. It sounds like you might be content. The hardest part of any kind of campaign, email, article is just starting it. But once you have that starting point of, just, words on a page, creating a cohesive storyline that to kind of lead people where you want them to go and inform them, it's a lot easier. And it just, I read another post that was like, it took away the kind of the boring parts of being a copywriter, the boring parts of managing content. And yeah, to an extent, I can see that.
yeah, I love it, man. I'm curious. So you're using these tools, you're using it to help you with your job and your clients. I am curious, where do you see AI going in the next 5 years? And also, I'm really curious where you can see, or if you see how it may be affecting your job and how you'll work with your clients, say again, in the next 5 years.
Yeah, great question. And I guess the truth is, we can't really know. We can predict. And I think that we should have some guardrails around AI, as with any tool. But I think that, I think there are going to be a lot of people who think they can do stuff, and because I have AI, it cure all, I can do anything. And they're going to find out, oh crap, I can't. And it's going to be useful for them, but it's not going to be as potent as if you hadn't mastered those skills. And it's going to be very easier for people to tell, I think, who relies on it or who uses it. And there's a difference. I'll use AI, I don't rely on it. And I think that's how, smarter marketing should be. Relying on something kind of takes the weight off of your own responsibility and your own focus and your own future. And I don't want to see people, using it as a crutch. I want to see people using it as a tool to help them generate, faster content, better strategies, but ultimately being able to, use what's in their mind to, get the job done. I was coming to a point with that. I'll come back to me, but yeah, I think that I think we will see a lot of people. So, case in point, I was doing a. This wasn't for. It was actually for a part of a job application that I was working on, but I was asked to do, a sales pitch for a couple of slides, and my concentration is mostly on, content, so a lot of writing focus, and I'm used to working with and directing graphic designers, but I don't, I'm not I wouldn't call myself a big graphic designer at that point. And I pulled it off, but I was like, gosh, it's such a different mindset being a designer versus being a more copy focused or even email centric marketer. Those kinds of skills have value. And it kind of put a light bulb in my head. What could graphic designers do if they had, access to AI that could help them create their, backgrounds and logos and imagery? They just would, nothing could stop them. I mean,
Yeah,
but it's almost, it would be kind of useless if they didn't have those foundational skills. So what I'm hoping is that we're going to have people that will have foundational skills and still focus on these things and focus on, narrative and focus on, authentically human content, but who will use AI as a way to expedite the process and be able to kind of like pinpoint better ways to deliver said content and messaging.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, that's interesting. Like how you're mentioning AI with graphic designers. I do a bit of graphic design. Just I do a lot of media stuff. So let's say for like a YouTube thumbnail, I actually like currently me and my team will use let's say ChatGPT or Sora to like say instantly generate like a background just to get you like started. And like it could just be something pretty basic, but it's something like it might save you 5, 10 minutes. But then you can do that with each little like piece of like this thumbnail. And, like then you have to have the foundational skills to go in and like piece it together. Um,
Exactly. Yeah. So you know exactly what I'm
yeah,
talking about.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah,
What I find so cool too is like as a writer, as you go through the content that I'm developing, I have images in my head of how I can convey the messages or even graphs that I could bring out. This gives me the tool to kind of create like you said, a thumbnail or even just a starter image. And maybe it's not perfect if it's a starter, but I can then hand it off to you, and you can take it from there as a graphic designer and to just make it perfect. If nothing else, this AI tool just gave me, a huge head start getting it complete. So I have the image, and instead of me going through and telling I want this, this, that, and this, here's the image. This is the rough take of what my vision has. Can you make it better? And you do. So that actually, you could argue it increases collaboration to a degree.
yeah, 100%, 100%. Uh, it's interesting. Like, um, let's say if we extrapolate this out, like say 5 years, and if we're going down the same path, like who knows what's going to happen, right?
Yeah, we don't
But
know. That's the thing. We live in the present. We can't possibly know. We can predict the best we can, and but we'll never know for certain. We just have to, do our best.
100%, yeah. And I think it's most likely what's going to happen. Let's say, especially like this year, it's just going to people that use AI and they get really good at using these tools, boosting their efficiency. They're ultimately are going to be the ones that say climb the ranks within corporate companies, are the ones that create
Yeah,
these awesome agencies and without having to let's say hire a more entry level people, which is a little bit sad, but I think that that's probably where we're headed in the near term. And
possibly.
so it's everybody I think is going to have to kind of up their game and learn all these tools to just boost the efficiency and boost productivity as much as possible to make themselves invaluable.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, and it goes back to those foundational skills. Like, if you have to use AI to write, I don't think you can really write really well. On the other hand, if you're a writer and not using AI, then you're potentially missing out on a great way to kind of expedite and increase the value of your work. So, there's always a couple ways to embrace change, and no matter what, it's scary. You can either say no, absolutely not, and life will probably just not treat you well because you're refusing change, or you can adapt to the change in a way that best works for you. The thing is, we control how we adapt to change, and it all starts with a mindset of, I'm going to make myself more valuable. And this isn't going to replace me. And I had to get over that fear too. This isn't going to replace me. I won't let it. I'm going to use it to help increase how I showcase how well I can do content.
Love it. I love it. Along down that vein, I love how you're saying like you're like I'm not going to let this replace me. Like I want to stay on top of this. I want to keep crushing it. I want to get better and better utilizing these tools and just going with the wave. I'm curious what you think outside of like the AI stuff. Like what do you think within your personal skill set is the most I would say AI proof?
Great question. Besides my humor. So, yeah, adaptability is something that every good marketer, especially in content, has to be. You have to be able to adjust and shift. AI is pretty adaptive. I mean, it's kind of in the word. I would say that one thing that I can do that AI can't is really understand kind of the empathy factor of, what's going on and how it's affecting the lives. So case in point, in Boston, so the one of the MSPs that I was doing some content for, they're talking about data security. And you can talk about why the product what or the technical aspects of what could happen, but until you bring in the fact that people, this doesn't just affect you, it affects your employees, it affects, your entire organization, it could shutter, but it also affects the people who rely on your business. Being able to bring in this aspect of the stories and kind of interweave it with this brand messaging is very important. So, you could argue that, like people tend to look at things like, oh, this came, so this is replacement. Oh, cars came about, we don't use horse anymore. Well, people still ride horses, it's not like, it's in some things do change, but that doesn't mean that the foundations of what the new technology has created go away.
Uh,
Kind of like what we were talking about with SEO. SEO isn't dead, but it has evolved. The foundations of what we do as marketers is constantly changing and constantly fluctuating. But one thing that's always remained the same is that, content sells, and that, people are looking for, data-driven information, useful information, that's inherently going to help them out. And if you look at, AI, it's focused around answering single questions, which is great. It's one of the ways you can get someone to your website, but they still want to find, if they're still product centric, they're probably going to be scrolling through Google and they're probably going to be looking for more in-depth questions. And by answering those questions and really expanding on the product and itself and the brand, you kind of hook them further. We haven't even talked about the funnel and the customer journey of how we could use it. But it all comes back into helping you kind of like pinpoint ways to tell the story. So if I can expand on that,
Absolutely.
maybe if I wanted to explore kind of like the mid tier of, say, a short-term nurture sequence, right? I might say, here's some ideas that I have for content pieces. What might statistically work the best? And then it spits out some information. Interesting. Let me do some research. That checks out. Let's do it. And from there, I can get an outline, go back, do a little bit of writing, put it back to AI, see what it, might change, do a few slight changes again, and then we go from there. But again, I'm still driving the machine. And I think that's always important. Like you said it yourself, you're only as good as how you can use it. So the more you experiment and the more you grow with it, I think it's just going to make everybody more valuable.
I completely agree. It's interesting, like how you're mentioning, like the one, I guess, two elements of yourself that would be like AI proof is humor and then empathy, which is pretty interesting because I've noticed a lot of these conversations that I'm having tend to always come back to soft skills. It's like, okay, like I'm using AI for all these like technical tasks, which is sweet, but
Yeah.
ultimately what's becoming more and more and more valuable is like these soft skills and these interpersonal skills that you aren't necessarily taught with a lot of them. It's like
Yeah,
you,
they're not
yeah.
really soft, are they? They're actually pretty important skills. I think one of the big things, big worries right now is kids in like using AI because they're using it for tests and everything. That to me is something more dangerous than and than anything else. It's important to have creative thought and original thought, but I don't. The old adage goes, nobody wants to be sold to. Well, nobody wants to read something written by a robot either. And they can sure as hell tell. So I think that, being able to kind of bring that humanity in and make it to be sincere, even though you're, using a part of a tool or however much you're using, and being able to clean it up and make it have a purpose and speak to another person just like you, I think is going to be the real differentiator. I think you mentioned looking forward in the future. I think that people who over rely on AI are going to be in a big fix too. Like I think people who cut all their people and just try and focus on AI, or who just have a really super lean team and they just say use AI. I think they're the ones that are going to struggle because you still need people to do the work. Even if you bring in all these tools, even if you bring in automation, it still requires people to execute. And so yeah, I think those people will probably have a wake up call.
Yeah.
But I think that the more that you kind of merge the human and the artificial element, I think you can create faster work and more work. Not even necessarily faster, just more aligned, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that absolutely makes sense. Yeah, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So you've been in the marketing game for, if I remember correctly, off your LinkedIn, about 9 years. You're now in, you're freelancing. You're working with a whole bunch of clients. I'm curious, what advice would you give someone that's just starting out, let's say in marketing just in general, but then also someone that's specifically trying to get into B2B SaaS marketing?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, I think the biggest thing right now is whether you look at, both Google and, LLMO, and it's, you know, it's very action focused, and it's very, what's going on, being up to date in your information and some of the tracks that are going on is going to be very essential. Knowing about the industry, knowing about the different niches, knowing about, kind of the big changes going on, or the biggest, you know, for lack of a better term, the biggest risks. Like if there's a big breach, I want to know about it. I've done a couple of posts, like LinkedIn posts, where I kind of call out some of these major issues. The whole paradigm of, the cyber criminal just being this, geek that sits in the corner, and he's just, that's changing, because now, especially through the dark web, anybody can do it. And not only that, but it's not only more accessible, it's becoming more profitable to steal data. And there are kits you can buy that'll help you do it. I mean, having this information and being able to take that as a marketer and kind of weave that into how you're, addressing these pain points, and how your solution kind of like positions you to overcome that, is going to be critical. And that's really for anything. In fintech, maybe it's, you know, what's going on the, global stage when it comes to, trade and finances, and tariffs and stuff like that. It's knowing what the end result is. How is everything that's going on right now affecting, the compliance settings, and things, just simple basic things like that. So just know what's going on. And I would say the last thing is just kind of be open-minded. So it's not enough to just use technology, it's also how you can apply it. And, what about you can you infuse into your work to make it even better?
I love it. I love it. It's really just stay on top of everything that's going on, especially whatever niche you want to focus on. And then it's just like, yeah, like utilize that within the content you're creating, whatever you're marketing, correct? It's just,
Yeah, and
yeah,
it's read too. There's
yeah,
SaaS. It's saturated with so much some good information, some bad information. But even after I will do a piece on data security, I'll explore it even further. I'm learning as I'm developing the piece. I have all these
yeah,
data and these numbers sticking in my head. You don't necessarily have to go out and kind of do what I'm doing, and going through a certification process, or getting a basic understanding of it. You can just be looking at these different places. And there's a couple of, utilize LinkedIn. That's another thing. I'm not a big social media guru, but LinkedIn is invaluable for, getting the latest takes on, big thought leaders, and, just kind of, you can get newsletters for some of these really major organizations. Like I think there's a couple of cybersecurity ones that I follow, and that it's constantly feeding new information. I don't have to hunt it down. I don't have to put in a Google, or I can just like get a ping on my phone and just kind of know what's going on. And knowing that, if I, talking with a client, it's going to make me even more valuable too.
yeah. Yeah, I love it. I love it. LinkedIn is such an interesting social media network because it's like, I feel like it's definitely one of the most cringe platforms you ever see. Like you see a lot of really cringe content on there, but you also see tons of super valuable stuff as well. And you also get like opportunity to directly connect with like
Yes.
executives and founders and people that otherwise you just really have no window into being able to talk to these people.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
100%. Networking is a big, that's how we met. We
Yeah.
met on the social platform. And I think also it's the setting of it. On Facebook, it's very casual. LinkedIn, you're there to do business, regardless of what you're doing. You're there to, increase your authority. You're there to learn. And I think that's a big part of it. I will say, if we're talking marketing, Reddit's going to be another big social media platform that we're going to want to develop content around, especially with AI. LinkedIn's huge. Everybody's got to be, all your C level people. It's more important now than ever to have postings and have that authority out there. And that's why people like me exist, to help give these leaders their voice, and do it in a quick and efficient and, brand focused way.
I love it. I'm curious. So you mentioned Reddit. Reddit is for me, a scary and traumatizing place. So I would love to hear if you have any like advice for like how to do effective marketing within Reddit. Because a lot of these niche communities, they're like, you gotta be in. You gotta like really understand their culture and be able to really
Yeah, man, 100%. Well,
Yeah, yeah,
let me
yeah,
preface this by saying that I'm not, there's some people that have a social media focus. I'm not one of them, but content is valuable wherever it goes. So whatever I create, I design it to be shareable on LinkedIn, shareable on Facebook, even used on, organically. Just stories matter, and you're going to want to always have material that will be able to give you the most reach, right? So I have a background in it, and mostly that I would be sharing like, just content I've developed. And it's a great point to start a conversation. So one thing that I could see happening is a company A starts, starts posting their piece on Reddit, and then just starts inviting conversation. And from there, you start having a back and forth, and you build your domain that way. If that makes sense.
yeah, yeah. That absolutely makes sense, and I think written content definitely has an advantage there
It does.
over, say, video. Yeah,
But that could change too. And that's not to say that maybe you can't make a GIF to throw on there as well. Visuals obviously grab people. But from what I understand, again, I'm not a Reddit expert. These people who use Reddit want the data, they want the information. So if you wanted to post like what I've done, post an article, focusing on a specific issue or a specific aspect of the product, maybe you want to throw out, I'm just going to make up a number here. 60% of companies are likely to experience data breach. Whoa, huge. Read the article, learn about it, and then, kind of you get that authority. It's going to take you back to the site too. So being able to grab people and then, kind of nurture their interest and curiosity through that content is going to be very key. And from the information, conversations start. And I'd say that LinkedIn's great at starting conversations as well.
yeah. I completely agree. I think that's probably LinkedIn's strongest element is just the way that it's able to actually foster real
Yeah.
conversation and connection, especially like outside the platform, is fantastic for networking. Whereas like Reddit, I think it's fantastic for like getting information and having some conversation. However, everyone's faceless. And so you don't really know who you're talking to. And so it's really hard to have like a real connection, which I think is why it makes it, for me, so scary and
Because it's very,
traumatizing. It's
yeah.
because people can be vicious
Yeah.
without any
Total,
consequence. Yeah.
total net. Yeah. Anonymity, man. Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, but still, that's one of the things that, AI, scrolls for. So it's something that, kind of what we're talking about, something that you need to, adapt and learn about. And it's one of the things that I need to learn a little bit more about. Um,
Yeah. Yeah, I am really curious. So at Paramify, we're very focused on implementing strategies that are brought up in the book called They Ask You Answer. I'm curious, as a content writer, have you heard about this book or
they
this
ask
strategy?
you, they ask you answer no, but I am gonna write it down.
Yeah, it's a fantastic, fantastic book, fantastic strategy. And
Okay.
the reason why I bring this up is just the other day, we had people posting on LinkedIn, taking a screenshot for one of our blogs and then just like celebrating it. Like, oh, this is just like really useful information. It was wild. And it got like a significant amount of reposts and reshares and we got reshared even by the creator of FedRAMP itself, which was,
Wow, that's impressive. Yeah.
yeah, it was like really cool. This isn't a blog I wrote. This is something Becky wrote, but I just bring this up just because, yeah, the strategies are really cool. And if you haven't heard about that book, I definitely
Yeah.
recommend it.
I have it up on Amazon right now, so I'll definitely look into that. It kind of almost sounds like
Yeah,
a book. Another book I'm familiar with was called Start with Why, and it kind of influenced
yeah,
my perspective on that. Yeah, I'm gonna have to look. I'd love to share that post from Becky if you want to drop it in the chat or email it to me. Actually,
absolutely.
I'd love to read it. So
Yeah, yeah, I'll send it to you.
yeah, she sounds great. I'd love to meet her
Yes,
as well. But yeah, that's just looking it over. Yeah, link build. That's another thing. People who go on about SEO, they don't understand that it's not the end goal. Isn't to be number one on Google or even number one on Chat. It's to create engagement that leads to sales. That's the ultimate goal. Like I don't. I would rather have something that doesn't rank, but that ends up giving me more conversions than anything else. And part of well, I'd say one thing that I bring as a content person is, I'm not just writing for the ether. I say this whenever I work with someone. I don't want to just generate organic search. I don't want to just have content just living out in, the web. I try to work with salespeople and product specialists to create tools that they can then use. There's nothing better that really cements your authority and sells your product than saying, you have a problem. Well, we just wrote an article on how we address that. Here you go. You work in this industry. We just wrote a guide on how our solution, is tailored to kind of help your industry kind of solve these problems that you might be having. It's kind of like in a way, it's a new wave of, word of mouth. It's, I can create this to help you, and you can, because even still, having a competent sales team is so important. Having, even now, I don't want to talk to a robot. I want to talk to a specialist. It's so funny. I keep hearing that in my mind, but yeah,
Yeah.
this is great. I'm gonna check it out,
Love
man.
it. Yeah, absolutely, man.
Thank you. Thank you
Yeah,
so
of
much.
course, man. Yeah. I'll send that your way. It's just one of those things that like I found to be super valuable. We apply it with like most of our marketing stuff. So I do a lot of the media, video, and all goes hand in hand.
It does, yeah.
And that's another thing that's really interesting is like, at least for me. So like I'm constantly collaborating with like Becky and then Adam, it's a couple of people on our team that really manage a lot of this, like I guess the product marketing and the copywriting for Paramify. But then I'm like creating all like videos and video forms of their blogs and video forms of their all that
Yep.
stuff. And
I know
it's just
exactly.
been like such a powerful mix.
Yeah, because I would do that too. It's funny. That's why I like working in a team as well. And I'm looking to actually get back into working with a team. I think very soon. But because in the end, if you're just you're not just a writer. When you're a part of a group, you bring this aspect, another person brings another aspect. And it's really like a three-dimensional way to create a story that tells the brand, that's spoken about the brand. So yeah, you play a huge role, and Becky plays a big role, and I'm sure you have another, like a graphics person.
Yeah.
On your own, you're great, but together you create something even more valuable. And that's, yeah, it's something really cool to see. So
Yeah. And that's something I might even just like throw in, just like B-roll right here. It's just like what kind of like what we're talking about. Like that blog post I'm mentioning is like video and like to what you just mentioned is like I
oh
believe we
oh my
have graphics and
oh
then
my
it's
God,
like
yeah.
the whole blog. Yeah.
I love video. I love having video with blog. You have to. I mean, that's one of the biggest things I recommend. Don't just have just have the written content. People scan through it. Have it to where it's readable because people read, but have video in there. Have images and graphs that they can kind of scroll along and read through. That
Yeah.
even they can click through. It makes it even better. Actually, some of the posts that were based off of the interviews, I pinpointed specific areas of my article where I want this portion here. I want this one here because it helps add and tell the story. So yeah, so cool to hear you guys do that as well.
Yeah. I love it, man. I love hearing about your experience and how you're implementing some of those strategies. It sounds like you're already super aligned with like what's said in that book that I mentioned, They Ask You
Yeah,
Answer.
but
Um,
gotta keep learning. That's another thing you gotta tell yourself, I gotta keep learning.
100%. Yeah. One last thing I would like to ask you is, what is let's say a podcast or a book that you go to, or let's say even a newsletter, that you go to continue to hone your skills and stay educated, within your space?
It's a great question. A couple ways I can answer this. I will say, I think one book that really, I think, set me on the path I am, and I really need to revisit as I, look to possibly pivot and just even grow my skills more as a content person, or potentially with, shifting into, cybersecurity directly, is the Success Principles by Jack Canfield. It's really inspiring, but it also kind of gives you, it's all about creating accountability. Great people are great despite what happened to them, not because. Like, nobody was born that they could do this. They had experiences, and it helped, and the way that they adjusted or evolved, with change, helped them become great because they chose to respond to that way. So great book, Jack Canfield, highly recommend. As for newsletters, I try to follow a couple. It's so hard on LinkedIn. It's a blessing and a curse because it's like, oh, I get all these newsletters, and it's like, oh my God, I have all these newsletters at the same time.
Yeah.
So trying to follow them all is going to be crazy. I will say Threat Locker is a really good one. I'm even pulling out right now, and they're talking about preventing backdoor hacking and kind of like solidifying identity in a way that prevents that. And that's something great. It's again, I can go down another rabbit hole. And look, it's your favorite thing. It's remote access Trojans, rats. So more of those little short. It's like, boy, new ones to learn. I love
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
But even that, I never even heard of that because. But well, I mean, that's true. I knew of backdoor attacks, but kind of seeing how something like that is evolving too. Ransomware is still one of the biggest threats, and it's changing, and it's becoming even more dangerous. So classic examples of like anything that's going to give shock you right away, like, oh my god, there's you can there are new ways to prevent these kinds of attacks. Yeah, just, and again, it goes back to the good writing, how it kind of prevents. They're literally starting with how to identify and prevent backdoor attacks, question, and then they answer it. It's something as seamless as that, but it's the simplicity in a way that's the best telling story, right?
Man, Eric, this has been a fantastic interview and fantastic podcast. I'm super grateful that you came on the show. Like, it's super cool.
Thank you so much, Keaton. I've
Yeah.
really enjoyed talking to you.